So good afternoon, everyone. And we would like to thank you for attending this side event here at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, where we're going to discuss global agreements to local actions, financing adaptation and loss and damage in developing Asia Pacific. Before we formally begin, we would like to invite everyone to, if you would like to sit in the front, so we can have perhaps a more intimate experience, I suppose. Thank you. Okay. So COP29 is widely known as a finance COP, where many of the big decisions that are going to be made here in Baku across different work streams, whether it be on the new collective goal on quantified goal on climate finance or on adaptation, loss and damage mitigation, among others, will ultimately be affected as well by the decisions that the parties will make based on climate finance. But the big question is, once COP29 is over, how do we translate these global decisions, specifically on adaptation and loss and damage, into country-level policies and actions? So this side event will highlight why we should genuinely finance transformative adaptation and explore innovative practices and frameworks for making loss and damage and adaptation more relevant to the national and even local levels, using cases of communities and stakeholders in the developing countries of Asia and the Pacific. And today we are joined, fortunately, by a rotating panel of experts representing different countries, regions, sectors, and issues of focus. So I'm John Leo Algo, the Deputy Executive Director of Living Laudato Si Philippines, bringing to you this side event courtesy of the members and partners under the Asia Climate Change Consortium. And to begin our session for today, I would like to introduce first our first panelist, who is the head of the Climate Bridge Fund Secretariat at BRAC. I would like to introduce Golam Rabani.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Well, my name is Golam Rabani again. Okay. You hear me now? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I'm actually heading the Climate Bridge Fund Secretariat, which was established by BRAC with support from the government of Germany through KfW, and we are supporting locally led adaptation actions, small scale adaptation actions in some selected urban areas in Bangladesh. So we support NGOs on adaptation, but that is not my area, or issue to discuss at this side event. I will actually talk about some of the known facts and figures, in terms of financing adaptation actions and loss and damage. We had, long negotiations, over the last almost 3 decades, and finally, we have got the Paris Agreement, and we are still struggling with the adaptation finance flow to be ensured in vulnerable countries, vulnerable Asian countries, and of course the other countries as well. But our today's event will focus on Asian vulnerable countries. So what we see, in terms of nationally determined contribution and national adaptation plan, countries are now, most of the countries, in fact, out of 155 developing countries, except Yemen, all countries submitted their NDCs. 46 countries submitted their NAPs. And what we see now, different countries, vulnerable countries in Asia, they are struggling with having access to this, adaptation finance. And if I give you, some of the facts and figures under three major points, what are the adaptation finance needs? If you look at the adaptation finance gap report published by UNEP, it shows that East and Pacific region needs 158 billion US dollar per year. 158 billion. South Asia needs 97 billion US dollar per year. In terms of countries, Bangladesh needs 8.5 billion dollar per year, and each every other countries had their submitted their needs per year. So if you look at the global needs, the adaptation gap report and other reliable sources indicate that the needs are between 194 billion dollar to 387 billion dollars. So global needs are very high, countries needs are there, regional needs are there, but availability of adaptation finance compared to needs is peanut. If you consider 2021 is $21.5 billion. Maximum was $25 billion. So this is the situation. My second point is, if you look at the adaptation finance commitments between 2017 and 2021, in 5 years, the adaptation gap report shows that Asian countries got the highest adaptation finance, but 80 to 90% are loan, 10 to 15% grant. If I give you an example, some of the examples, India got 7.49 billion US dollar in this 5 years. Philippines got 3.83 billion, in this 5 years. Bangladesh got 4.3 billion, Myanmar got 1.4, Cambodia 1.27, Nepal 1.48. So these are the commitments of the developed countries, development partners to these countries, Asian countries. While I say that the need is very high, in India, they need around $17 billion per year. And they have got the commitment of $7.49 billion. 80 to 90% of this total amount is loan, and in 5 years. So it's completely peanut. It's not working. Then what happens to this? Due to lack of adequate adaptation finance, the people are facing climate crisis, which means this leads to the burden of loss and damage. If you do not support adaptation finance, if you do not make sure that adaptation finance flow is ensured to these vulnerable countries and vulnerable communities, they will experience highest level of loss and damage. While they need 387, they get only 21. 366 billion adaptation finance gap we see every year. Basically, this will actually go to the loss and damage burden. And I give you one example as the disbursement issue. Interestingly, disbursement rate was only 66% on adaptation finance, while it was 98% for development finance during 2017-2021. So the development partners are doing all right with their commitments on the development fund, but on the adaptation finance, disbursement is much lower than the development finance flow. If I just take one example from Bangladesh, I represent Bangladesh, so I will give you a bit more focus on Bangladesh. As I shared, that Bangladesh has prepared and submitted their NAP and NDC, and they indicated that Bangladesh needs 230 billion US dollar between 2023 and 2050, which means $8.5 billion per year. And Bangladesh, from its domestic budget, they are contributing approximately 3 billion US dollar per year, and they depend on the external development finance, external sources, for 6.5 billion, and getting only few hundred million, not even 1 billion. So this is the gap that we see not only in Bangladesh but entire Asia, in every country. As I said, 80 to 90% loan. Whatever they get, 80 to 90% loan. So this actually indicate deepening climate crisis, which leads to increased loss and damage, as I shared several times. Let me now focus a bit on loss and damage, and that will be my last point. Initial estimate was 400 billion, as you have seen, in a number of reports and documents. Now, some estimates indicate that the loss and damage fund requirement has gone up to $724.43 billion per year for the developing countries. 724 billion US dollar, 400 to 724. And fund for loss and damage and global shields are still nowhere in the game. We see 792 million US dollar is available for loss and damage from the pledge, and in the first week we heard that Sweden has pledged around $19 million, so it's just crossed 1 billion. Where 400 billion and where is 1 billion to address loss and damage? So the extreme suffering, extreme impact of climate change will be felt by the people of Asian countries, vulnerable countries. Doesn't matter whether it is least developed countries, developing countries, small island states. And pledges are not yet paid. And it seems like they will need, at least 2 more years for disbursement. In this year, Bangladesh has experienced floods, heat waves. South Asia, entire South Asia faced heat waves. Philippines just experienced, the typhoon. So the countries are experiencing, the extreme impact of climate change. But we explored, we negotiated, we demanded new and additional fund, but we got new and additional problems, heat waves, heat stress, but new and additional fund is absent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Golam Rabani, for discussing about mainstreaming climate actions in the national level, focusing on national adaptation plans and the link to the loss and damage imperative in the Asia Pacific. So now, for our next speaker, we would like to hear a view from one of our negotiators that are joining us today for this panel. No? And excuse me, I would like now to welcome and to give the floor to a member of the board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. Please welcome Dr. Maheshwar Dakal.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. I will, because time is running out, and I will try to brief as long as possible. But before that, first of all, Asia, our region, is larger in area with coastal and mountain communities, rich biodiversity, population density is much higher, and developing country of Asia, particularly least developed countries, mountainous countries, low carbon emission. Despite the fact our people are most impact, less capacity to cope the climate change. That's why our clear message to the COP29 and developed countries is, please be ambitious in climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building of our people. It's a very clear message. And even sometimes generating finance is not enough unless you build the capacity to access the finance and make the capacity to disperse the finance. That is very clear message for the developed countries. And developing country also, we do have improved some areas. Policy should be in place. Institutional setup should be in place. And nature-based solution is the best idea for Asia. And at the same time, let's focus on the vulnerable communities. Climate finance is not just a finance, it's a justice. Climate finance is not a finance, and the number fund is a justice. That's why let's build the capacity and focus to the local communities who are most suffer. Particularly in Nepal, we have a very good policy. Climate change policy is clearly mentioned 80% of the funds should go to the ground, even though there are some revision needed. And we do have NAP, National Adaptation Plans. We estimated around 49 billion we need, but more than 90% of the finance is deficit. Then we need additional one. And then second, NDC, we make a very ambitious NDC. As being the developing, least developed country, we made a very good NDC, but very rare supported previous speaker speaks. We are getting very low support. That's why we have to be. And at the same time, Nepal is the least carbon emission country, but our commitment is, our government is committed to make our country carbon neutral by 45. Now I am coming to your questions about the loss and damage fund. It's very pretty clear. Even though last year COP gave the very clear mandate to the board, and we already completed all the mandates. Host country agreement, Philippines is already signed, and trustee agreement with bank, we already signed, and pledge agreement is already in place, and executive director is already ready, and the fourth board meeting is going to discuss about access modality. What type of access modality you are looking for? Same is in the JEF, GCF, or like multilateral development bank, or is more simplified one? Is a least developed country, most climate vulnerable countries representative. My message is very clear. We have to be national entity and direct access is our priority. Very clear. National entity and direct access. And as I said, capacity building of our developing country, even loss and damage we need. But in loss and damage, there are sudden onset or slow onset. We have to be very practical also, pragmatic. We do not necessary to have a very, sometimes, loss and damage when we are discussing, many people, they are very, very much emotional. For me, I do not like to be emotional. In sudden onset, I think sometimes you have to be look from the humanitarian perspective. What type of disaster you are facing, the people are facing, and trigger approach we have to apply it over there. Trigger approach for the sudden extreme weather events. But on the other hand, we can discuss more flexible way on slow onset impact, either programmatic approach, but at the same times, LDC and SIDS are looking some dedicated support from the fund to the most vulnerable communities. But at the same time, for me, as a citizen of Nepal and then delegate of Nepal, definitely my people and my country, definitely it is my priority. But fund is a global level, then let's think about the most risk areas and risk communities. Let's assess them. Even let's build the capacity, very frequently risk assessment, who are vulnerable in terms of finance or disasters. Let's fix the threshold. Then we can find the real people and we can support them. At this moment, I have very clear message and I would like to conclude my remarks here, friend, and then I have to leave. I'm sorry that I have another meeting from 2 o'clock and I have to reach there. Thank you very much for your time. I will be with you, together with you, and we'll discuss. Even the board, next fourth board meeting is going to organize very soon, 2 weeks later, and we'll discuss about the modality and the how fast we can disperse the money and make all the rules of procedure, all the things. Thank you very much, sir. sorry, I will. Thank you very much. Now we'll see later. Yeah.
Okay. All right, no problem. We'd like to again thank you, Maheshwar, for allotting us time to speak in this event. And yes, it speaks to the, I guess, chaotic way of COP29. That's why I mentioned earlier at the start that we do have a rotating panel of speakers. And yes, right after this COP29, perhaps the next major UNFCCC event is the board meeting on the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, which will be held in my country, in Manila, in a matter of weeks. And that certainly will be another event for us to keep an eye on. Very relevant for our topic for today about translating global gains to national and local actions, specifically through finance. And speaking of which, now I would like to give the floor to our next panelist, who would like to discuss their experiences at their community in Nepal. And I would like now to give the floor to the chairperson of the Kumbu Pasang Lamu in Nepal as well. Please welcome Mingma Chiri Sherpa.
Namaste, Tash Delhi. I'm Mingma Chiri Sherpa from Kumbu Pasang Lamu Rural Municipality. And I'm here to share I'm here to representing from my community, especially the Thame area, the Kumbu and the Thame area, which is in Everest region. And Thame is a place where the Apa Sherpa, Kamirhita Sherpa, they were born, and there's the birthplace of Kamirhita Sherpa, Apa Sherpa, and Tenzing Norgay Sherpa, who climbed the mount, who was the first summiter of Mount Everest. And in August, there was a flood from that area. So the flood swept away the blazes, the beautiful blazes, and we were suffer a lot. And not only the sort of settlement, the flood swept away our drinking water supply, drinking water, our hydropower, a road, and motorable bridge, and many damages many things that area. So still we are after that the rural municipality we did some relief work, some immediate relief, some immediate response to build the road access, to build the to rebuild the hydropower temporarily, and all these things. But that is not enough. So still we are still our community, they are still suffering from from the cold and from for the permanent settlement. I mean for permanent settlement. So our victims, the victims of the vulnerable area, they are still in permanent in temporary shelter. So we are trying to get funds to resettle them, to rebuild their houses, to rebuild our school, to rebuild our clinic, and to rebuild all these things with the help of international community, with the help of Nepal government and other stakeholders. And also the Kumbu, especially the Everest area, we have many mountains, many glacier lakes, and many glaciers. But the problem is melting day by day, and the melting rate is very, very high. So Thame is just a part of Kumbu. So there are other many vulnerable areas. So the challenging part is we have to research. We have to do more things to prevent to prevent from the disaster and all these things. Yeah, thank you. So I will talk you. I will share my things later.
Thank you very much, Mingma Chiri Sherpa, for sharing your experiences from your community in Nepal. So we would like now to invite to join us here in the front our other speakers now, Mr. Sunil Acharya and Abhishek Shrestha. If you'd like to join us on the podium here. Keep on bumping with this one. I know, right? Yeah. Okay. So in continuation from Mingma's speech earlier, we would like to now ask one of our newest panelists from the program director from the Digo Bikas Institute, also in Nepal, Avi, if you would like to also add to what was mentioned earlier by Mingma regarding demands on climate finance and loss and damage from the perspective of communities from Nepal.
Thank you very much, and we'd also like to welcome all the participants in today's side event. So as Mingma, who is the chairperson of Khumbu Pasanglamu Rural Municipality, that is gateway to Everest in the Everest region, has already shared like what the community has going through. Because if you see, loss and damage is one of the key issues for many global south countries, and we have already seen the loss and damage impacts in different part of Nepal. And as Pasangji have already shared that how the people has been going through. So along with, in coordination with the rural municipality, we also did a research out there. So what we found out that in just merely less than 50 household, the villages suffer like 4.1 million US dollar of like economic losses. The non-economic losses has not been yet quantified, and it has been a very difficult time for the people out there. So, and it's already clear that they need that resources. As one of the board member of Loss and Damage Fund was already here, and he has been saying that they have been working, and we have already seen, and then different researches has already find out that we need, like global south countries needs like $450 billion per year to address the loss and damage. And where are we right now? It's like hardly $670 million. So there's a big mismatch. And the people of the Khumbu is just an example where they are left to die. Like they have been suffering very hard. Like it's just one story of like the global south, but many global south countries that's in Africa, Asia, and Latin America are suffering that. So we are here to make a very clear demand that these leaders has to keep their promises. They can't go here like empty hands. He came far from the mountains to make sure that, but we have been talking about climate justice. Where is climate justice? Where the vulnerable people are not being delivered that resources. So that's why we are here taking this as opportunity to convene here to share this message through the side event. So again, so I like to share that this report. So that's here that like loss and damage in the high mountains of the region, realities, pains and perils from Thame. So we really look forward. And then also the board member already mentioned that we are looking for direct access and then more country on. But again, are we sure that the resources that's direct access reach the community? The other key demand for us that when we talk about the direct access, it has to go to the community. So it should, so we have been discussing about the community window in loss and damage fund. So we have to make sure that the community window is in operation, and the communities like Thame get that resources so they can start working on rebuilding work. So I like to end on that. And also we have like a virtual reality of Thame. Though we cannot take all of you to Thame, but Digo Bikas along with Climate Risk and Resilience Lab have put an effort to bring Thame to COP29. So on 18th and 19th November on the exhibition 30th, where we have our booth. So we'll be having that virtual reality tour so that you can feel connected with Thame and the suffering of the people of Khumbu Pasanglamu Rural Municipality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Avi Shrestha, for discussing the situation from the mountains of Nepal. And we note that, of course, during SB 60, there has been an increased attention to addressing the needs and concerns of communities in the mountains and those near the oceans. But of course, as he just mentioned, certainly more can still be done, especially in in terms of decision making that includes communities from across different parts of the world. Okay, so at this point, I would like now to also give the floor to one of um, one of the board members of the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage to give her perspective on this whole issue regarding uh, translating the global gains on financing adaptation, loss, and damage from the global to the national and local levels. So we are honored to be joined as well by, again, the representative of the Women and Gender Constituency, more specifically, to the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage from the Philippines, Ms. Tetet Nera Lauron.
All right. Thanks very much. And I really do appreciate this opportunity to share with you a little bit of good news, no? Because we've all been hearing stories about vulnerability, resilience, the challenges. I think it's about time that we really talk about accountability and transformation, no, at this COP. I feel so this is also another panel. Let me just, it's not a criticism to the organizers, no, but maybe to the way we're so used to organizing things. I'm the only female speaker in this panel, no. I'll take it as a badge of honor, but maybe, you know, we can do things better because we deserve better. So let me tell you about the Santiago Network on Loss and Damage. It's a little known actor now at this COP, but I think at COP25 in 2019 in Madrid, I don't know if you still remember, Santiago Network was the newest kid on the block. Do you still remember that? Yeah? So it was established at COP25 in Madrid as part of the WIM, the Warsaw International Mechanism, which serves both the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Now, the mandate of Santiago Network is to catalyze technical assistance of relevant organizations, bodies, networks, and experts to support averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage at local, national, and regional levels in developing countries, particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. The Santiago Network was a key outcome of the second WIM review, and now we're having another WIM review at the moment, no? So it's really very timely. So developing countries called for more focus on the WIM's third function. Do you remember? Do you know what the WIM's third function is? I'm sure you don't. It's about action and support. And the WIM was miserably failing on delivering on that action and support, which is why the Santiago Network, you know, it was agreed, it was a painful recognition by the WIM EXCOM and the COP25 in Madrid that the WIM was not delivering on its most crucial function of action and support for addressing, minimizing, and averting loss and damage. So the Santiago Network was born out of that failure, like a phoenix rising up in the ashes. Now, COP26 Glasgow, let's go fast forward. The functions were agreed and commitments that the Santiago Network will be provided with funds to support technical assistance. So COP27, you can see how long and laborious the process is to operationalize something in this space, no? So from COP25, COP26, COP27, they finally agreed on the institutional arrangements as set out in the terms of reference, that there's going to be a hosted secretariat, that there's going to be an advisory board, and it was also agreed that 3 civil society constituencies would be serving as advisory board members. So there's the Women and Gender Constituency, the young people, and also from the indigenous peoples groups. So these 3 constituencies now serve as members of the advisory board with full speaking rights, no, at every meeting, and we make sure we maximize that right of being on the table. So the Santiago Network functions as a network that would catalyze technical assistance. It also focuses on capacity development, knowledge exchange, facilitating access to finance. And it's also a convener of relevant stakeholders. So in a way, you know, the Santiago Network could be a stepping stone for developing countries and communities to access bigger monies, bigger resources from the fund. So that's the beauty of it, no? Because the Santiago Network is not just focused on developing country governments accessing the fund, but we made sure, this whole year, we really focused on having intersessional meetings to draw up the rules of procedures, to draw up the guidelines for managing technical assistance requests, to draw up all of those necessary foundational work so that next year, 2025, the Santiago Network will now be fully operational. So we did our homework. And at this COP, we hope that the parties will agree and adopt all our recommendations as members of the advisory board. So there's been a lot of difficult conversations on how to process requests for technical assistance, on who can access technical assistance from the Santiago Network. Because I don't know if you still remember, there was that concern before that the Santiago Network would just be a matchmaking facility between requests and who can provide those requests. So we said, no, it's good that there's a matchmaking function to it, but let's not forget that we need actual resources. We need money. Yeah, so last COP, the last two COPs, we hear developed country parties make pledges to the Santiago Network operationalization. So what we try to ensure is that in the rules of procedure, in the guidelines of the Santiago Network, there would be that important provision of guaranteed minimum percentage of the funding available for communities. So I hear now that the struggle is how to get the resources to communities, and especially those organizations that are quite critical of how their government does business. We know that, from our experience. Those critical voices are not really in the good graces of many governments, not just in Asia, but all over. And they would have the hardest time to access resources. So what we made sure in the advisory board is that communities or governments will not have the sole monopoly of resources for the Santiago Network, that communities can access and that communities can easily become members of this network. Not like in the Green Climate Fund, not like in other entities where it is very, very hard to get accreditation. You have to go through national designated entity, etc., etc. But here, you just go to the website of the Santiago Network, you apply to be an OBNE, that's the acronym, organizations, bodies, networks, and experts. But now we're trying to simplify things. We just call them members of the Santiago Network. So that's very good now. So we're also in the process of supporting Vanuatu to access, because Vanuatu, if you recall, was the very first country who filed for an application for support for technical assistance. So that's how these agreements from global level can now go to country level. And even more than that, Santiago Network goes a little bit further, going down to the community level. So that's some kind of positive in this bleak landscape. So we do know that it is not just limited for governments to access, but ordinary organizations, communities, for so long as they are members of the network. Now, we're having the fourth review of the WIM. There's also a lot of discussion about what are the challenges that we are facing. Of course, as everybody has said, the challenge is the money. Where's the finance? Yeah. For the Santiago Network, even though I'm so upbeat about it, we only have around $40 million so far in pledges. And of that $40 million, only $7 million so far has been translated into actual contributions. 7 million with those contribution agreements already signed. I think the Secretariat is doing a good job in trying to follow up all of those pledges, but it's not enough. Right? It's not enough. And the level of ambition also for the Santiago Network is not really that transformative, because our upper limit for processing technical assistance would be around $200,000 per TA request. So it's not that much, but if you look at the flip side, it's about capacity building, it's about readiness preparation, it's about making communities ready to accept and submit bigger applications to the fund. I think 200,000 will go a long way, right? And if it's quite easy to access, then it's good. Money can be flowing to the countries and to the communities. So, which brings me to my last point. It's really crucial that at this COP, we make sure that we do get a sub goal in the NCQG for loss and damage. Because if there, my alarm, sorry. Because if we don't get that sub goal, then we cannot force developed countries to honor their obligations to provide financing. Yeah, so that is how we connect the dots between the discussions in the NCQG and also here for how these initiatives can really benefit countries and communities in our region. So thanks very much. I hope it's helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Tatet Lauron, for sharing her insights from the perspective of someone who's really well entrenched in the Santiago network on loss and damage in terms of the processes. And I think her intervention really speaks to the intersectionalities that we observe around here at COP, especially on the finance side. And of course, while most of us probably here in this room are looking at loss and damage as an issue that's applicable to either our country or our work, while a lot of attention has been really directed towards the fund for responding to loss and damage, we cannot forget that there are also other L&D mechanisms under the UNFCCC, including the Santiago Network and the WIM, that honestly also need some more support, and their own full operationalization can help communities and countries, especially in the Asia-Pacific region, address different impacts on climate change, specifically on adaptation and loss and damage. So thank you very much. So now we would like to welcome Mr. Sunil Acharya. Okay. I guess for now, we will now give the floor first to our newest panelist. She just came from another side event as well. So she's the executive director from Climate Watch Thailand, and she would like to speak on addressing the needs of the agri-fisheries and food systems amidst the harsh impacts on climate change. Please welcome Wanan Permpibul.
Thank you very much. My apologies for being late. We've been working with the fisher folks and also those in the small-scale food producers, especially farmers and traditional fisher folks. And what we have seen that they on the ground have already observed a lot of impacts of climate change because their life and livelihoods are mainly depending on the weather and the pattern of the weather. So what they have been trying to survive and trying to do is to use their own resources and their traditional knowledge and also their money. Whether it is their own savings or getting access to loans. So those are for the resources for them to use to survive. So some of the examples of those in the coastal areas, they have been experiencing the sea level rise and also the storm surge getting into the mangroves area and their settlements. So what they've been using is to use their traditional knowledge of building bamboo lines in order to slow down the waves and tides in getting into their coastal areas and settlements. And from those working on that, it's really a challenge of the mainstream adaptation that has been promoted by the private sector and the government, because the government and the private sector is also using the hard infrastructure to prevent the sea level rise and also the high tides into the settlements. So what they are doing is doing the hard one, just like the sea walls. So with that hard infrastructure, it was doing things very bad rather than doing something good. So these communities initiatives and using the traditional knowledge of women's traditional knowledge of building the bamboo lines, it's kind of really getting into the debate that these are really the real solution. And with that, we at that time, 5 years ago, we concluded that that is the real adaptation. And then just last year, we noticed that through the bamboo lines, the water came in, and also there are some small waves getting through the bamboo lines, getting into the settlements and the coastal areas. So what does that mean? That means that there are also the limit to the adaptation. So that means if we are not doing anything at all, and this whole mangrove and also the coastal areas would be gone, and that would be the total loss and damage. So the adaptation has reached its limit as of now, because they have already observed some of the waves coming through the bamboo lines. So what would be happening? So that's why we're trying to get some funding, and also that's how we are carrying their needs and their demands here in order to demand the loss and damage finance, and also the finance not only for the loss and damage but for adaptation as well. So we really need to put a lot in terms of the adaptation finance, because we don't really want to see the loss and damage of those coastal areas and the coastal resources. So with that, I thank you, JL.
Thank you very much, Wanan, for your intervention. So it's good to also hear from different representatives of communities throughout the Asia Pacific. So for this session, we have heard from our representatives from Nepal, from the mountainous communities, and we just heard from Wanan about fisherfolk communities. And it speaks to the diversity of the Asia Pacific region and the different needs and concerns of what we would consider as highly vulnerable groups and sectors. And without further ado, I guess it's okay. So once again, we'd like to welcome the Regional Policy and Campaigns Coordinator for Asia at Oxfam International, and he would like to have a bit of a deep dive into the climate finance needs of Asia Pacific from their experiences at Oxfam International. Please welcome Sunil Acharya.
Yeah, thank you. So, and thank you also for this opportunity. We listened to some of the compelling cases from Nepal, Thailand, and also, examples of Bangladesh on why we need to make climate finance work for Asia. Because at the moment, what we've seen is this issue of climate justice, the need for providing adequate climate finance is not working. But let me briefly summarize why it is not working and what must be done. I have 3 points on the problem side. First and foremost, the climate crisis is escalating at an unprecedented rate, which all of us know, and Asia is particularly vulnerable. The temperature is rising higher than global average, whereas the climate disasters are also rising, in huge numbers. For example, just in 2023, Asia witnessed climate disasters that resulted in affecting 50 million people. Earlier this week, Oxfam launched a report which looked into what is happening in the Pacific. It turns out that the climate disasters over the last decade have increased by 700%. It's not 20%, it's not 100%, it is 700%. Can you imagine how the things are getting worse? While the climate finance needs are at the trillions of dollars, the finance that is coming to Asia is peanuts. We did an estimated, needs assessment of 18 countries in South and Southeast Asia in 2022. What it shows is they need 1.3 trillion per year to deal with climate change. It is the number only for mitigation and adaptation. It doesn't count loss and damage. On the other side, they are just receiving 14 billion per year. Compare the needs at 1.3 trillions and the money that is flowing at 14 billion per year, which is again the face value. We don't know, the climate finance counted by developed countries is actually true or not. So 14 billion in face value. And then the rich countries, the historical polluters, aren't paying their fair share. They owe trillions of dollars in climate compensation. And this is the moment, we need to make sure that there is an agreement to that direction. Secondly, most of the climate finance, I talked about some of the numbers, but for example, the $14 billion that is going to South and Southeast Asian countries, most of that is loans. We also did another report looking into the Asian Development Bank and let you know the MDBs, the multinational development banks are the preferred delivery channels of the rich countries to provide climate finance in our region and in developing countries. Our research showed that just 6% of ADB's climate financing was in grants and the remainder in loans. There is more problem with that. They are hugely overestimating, what they count as climate finance. Our report again showed that, they might be overestimating their numbers by up to 44%. Can you imagine, if they say $100 is what they have, committed, it's only about $66. And then there's another striking figure, less than 0.5%, just 0.5% of climate finance that goes to these countries in Asia can be termed as locally led. That means the people who are dealing with climate crisis on a day-to-day basis don't have a say in how climate finance is allocated and where it is spent. There are further issues with transparency, issues with inclusion and participation. Then let me come to the third point. The available funding often goes to false solutions, the solutions that don't work for farmers, workers, or communities. For example, a majority of the money also goes to problematic projects like biofuels, carbon offsetting, and a whole range of other false solutions. And then funding for adaptation is much less than that is going for mitigation, and we don't yet have any funding being channeled or being flown for loss and damage. We really hope the Santiago network operationalization happens soon, and there's some money going to the communities. But yeah, we are yet to look at that. So our demand is simple. Climate finance must be inclusive. It should be accessible. We've heard about the need for why climate finance should be accessible. It should be responsive to the needs of the people in Asia, because the way it is being mobilized, the way it is being channelized, as I mentioned, most of it is top down. The communities who need to receive it don't have a say in how it is, spent or delivered. So we need a complete overhaul on that. On top of that, as I mentioned about the striking difference between the needs and what is available. So climate finance must be adequate. It should be unconditional without any strings attached. And again, I will emphasize it should reach communities where it needed the most. Those who are impacted need to decide, how it is spent again. So yeah, most importantly, we need to, make sure that, we have the concrete numbers coming in from the rich polluting nations, not only for mitigation, but also for adaptation and loss and damage that is being negotiated at the moment here. Finally, that is my last point. People in Asia deserve better. So let's work together to make rich polluters to pay so that we can make climate finance work for Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunil, for presenting the case for climate finance in the Asia Pacific region. Before we move on to our open forum, we would like to give the floor to one of our panelists here, Avi, as he would like to share with all of you the following.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd just like to share, because most of us represent community, we work with the community. So as shared earlier, our team led by Climate Risk Resilience Lab and Digo Vikas had made an effort to take you to Thame, a virtual tour. So we have a QR. So if you are interested to see, as in this report, like realities, pains and perils from Thame village, then you can just go to the QR. So that QR takes you to the page where you can, that's over the website, where you can see the impacts of Thame. So there's a detail about different impact, and as shared on 18th and 19th on booth 38, we also have virtual reality where you can find more close to Thame, and that's why we are calling for more community access, or why the community impacted by loss and damage needs that resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, Avi. Again, we have the QR code on all the screens here in this room. So feel free to scan it and yeah, feel free to scan it basically. So we'll give you a few seconds to do so.
Or like, Prayas, can you help to project any screen once quickly? If yeah,
It's still there. Yeah.
not the tour. Oh, okay. No, it's you have to cancel on the right top, and then once after that you can get inside. Yeah.
Yeah. Would it be possible to also show on the screen the what happens when you after the tour itself rather? Will that be possible? No. Okay, fair enough. All right. So feel free then to use your mobile device or your laptop to do the tour of of Thame Village, excuse me, for the QR code. Okay. We would like now to open the floor for questions. We have a diverse panel of experts from different sectors and countries and communities in the Asia Pacific. Feel free to ask your questions to our panel. Yes, please.
Work? Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you for all the interesting stories to the panelists. And I was wondering, this side event was first called about innovative finance mechanisms. And I was wondering if I could get the opinion of the panelists on greenhouse gas emission pricing as a finance mechanism for the loss and damage fund to make sure that the polluter pays.
Thank you, sir. May we ask for your name and representation?
Yes, sorry. I'm Willem Brante from the True Animal Protein Price Coalition, and I had a coalition that calls for this measure to be implemented in the OECD in China. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone from our panel like to respond? The question, I believe, is on your opinions on greenhouse gas emissions pricing as a mechanism to fund actions against loss and damage. Would any of you would like to answer that question? Okay, Mr. Sunil would like to answer that question.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, yeah, there's been discussion on, how to raise the trillions needed to pay for the climate crisis, to deal with the climate crisis. Our, position has been always that it should come from the public sources, but where the governments, specifically in the global north, can raise those funds from. And there have been discussions on several options. Is Oxfam, what we are calling for is, taxing the rich polluters, so that, there's money that can be supported to developing countries, and that can form different forms. So, for example, the super rich who own assets and wealth do not effectively pay any taxes, right? So there's a huge potential in taxing their wealth and inheritance, and also their highly polluting actions such as the super yachts, private jets that they use. So we are calling for taxing on those. Which again relates to curbing the greenhouse gas emission, or putting that price on that. So yeah, we are looking into different options, but yeah, rich polluting countries needs to decide on implementing those. And this is also being discussed not only here in this COP, but within the G20 forums. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil, for that response. Would anyone from, Wanan would like to also respond to the question.
We were just discussing as well in terms of what it means by pricing greenhouse gas emissions. So if that relates to the carbon credits, or that is something that we are not supporting. But if it is taxing the big polluters and trying to make the polluters pay, and also that could also be something we might be discussing again, rather than putting it here, because in here we really want to get the public finance and the finance from just only the public sources. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so would we still have time for a couple more questions, probably 2 or 3? Would anyone like to ask our panelists their questions? Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all the panelists for this informative session. So I am SM Saif Iqbal. I am from Bangladesh, and I work as a program coordinator at International Center for Climate Change and Development. So my question is to Lauren, as you said that about the Santiago network, that its objective is to provide technical assistance to avoid, minimize, and address loss and damage. So I just want to know that as Santiago Network would like to provide technical assistance to the vulnerable communities. So what is the initial planning of Santiago Network from next year? How much funding actually they are planning to channelize from next year? And if Santiago Network channelize some funding from next year, what will be the sources of that funding? What is the modality of Santiago Network in that case? Thank you.
Yeah, at the moment, we are just talking about developed country governments making those pledges. So it's a good thing, no, that it's money flowing from the global north to the global south, according to the principles of equity, et cetera, et cetera. So as I've mentioned earlier, the initial budget now is around, the initial pledges we got is $40 million. Only 7 has turned into contribution so far. But we are also working on resource mobilization strategy. There's now a new executive director for the Santiago Network, and we have tasked the secretariat to come up with a resource mobilization strategy that would ensure that the Santiago Network would be in business for a long time. So it's not just going to be a one-off thing, but we're hoping that more money can be raised so that communities can access it.
Thank you, Ms. Tetet Lauron, for your response. There's another question at the back.
Thank you so much to the panelists. I am Oyun Banerjee. I work for an international organization called Practical Action. We've been working at the intersection of climate and poverty for the last 30, 40 years, so long before some of these conversations were in vogue. My question is actually twofold. Question number 1 is, what is the role that you see of international and domestic civil society organizations? I'm seeing Sunil, for instance, right? So what is the role of international and civil society organizations in resolving some of these issues, particularly in the case of very complex structured financial conversations, right? So we are not anymore talking about simple grants. We are talking about very complex mechanisms. And so it's complex because there are a large number of players, there are private players, there's government involved. There is a huge amount of structuring. And then my second question is, after doing all these layers of de-risking, you start with, let's say, $100. The eventual community is probably going to end up with 20 because 80% of that is going to huge number of intermediaries, international, local, et cetera. So is that something that worries you as responsible for the people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to respond to his twofold question? Yes, Sir Golam, please go ahead.
Well, on the role of CSOs at the national level or even at the regional level, I would, at a straight two small lines. The first one is, we should continue generating the evidences, at the country level and also at the, regional level. And with those evidences, old evidences and new evidences, we must, initiate the advocacy programs with the government systems and also with the development partners. As you all know, development partners, and multilateral development agencies, they prepare their own strategy for 3 years, 5 years, and more than that as well. So once we have those evidences, I think we should have these advocacy programs with them, and so that they actually integrate those evidences when they develop their or revise their strategies. So at least two lines, 2 points that I can respond to at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Golam. I believe Wanan would also like to provide a response to your question.
If that international NGOs is from the global north, so I would think that our role is to kind of trying to bridge and to bring in the voices from the ground and requesting and amplifying the voices of the local undergrounds through the national NGOs to be heard at the international global north-based NGOs, then to talk to their governments to deliver the climate finance. So I mean, with that, it's with the political implication as well. But the thing is, those who are working on the ground, they are having a very a very close monitoring of what has been the struggles and what has been the impacts of climate change and what are the locally led initiatives as well. So those needs to be kind of conveyed and also amplified at the international NGOs and civil societies as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Wanan. Would anybody else like to respond? Okay. All right. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
My name is Mikmar and I'm from Bhutan. So I'm an academician as well as a lawyer, but into the business and finance sector. So my question here to the panelists is, like, since we are seeing lots of now disaster out of this climate change is happening in the South Asia, like Bangladesh, Nepal, and definitely the recently happened in Bhutan as well. So now in terms of funding mechanism, like climate finance, like things are getting routed to the ADBs and from MDBs, like they have their own laws and frameworks and mechanism in place, but when we need money at that point of time and it's hard to get dispersed. So I wanted to know if you have, as a panelist, innovative way of accessing to finance, the trending one would be very beneficial for us to work on it for the nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to answer the question? Wait, please go ahead. Oh. Okay. Instead, that Laurent would like to respond.
Yeah, at the moment, we still do not have the fund operationalized. No? So they're still designing the whole architecture of the fund for responding to loss and damage. So what we have now is very complicated universe, not providing humanitarian assistance, especially for those sudden onset events, providing different kinds of support. But mostly, the initial response on the ground would be coming from internal sources. No, it's about us helping each other in the spirit of solidarity, in the spirit of helping out, who is in need. Like now in the Philippines, we've been battered by 6 typhoons, super typhoons in just 1 month. We are super typhoon wary already, but there's still, one after the other. Even our own national government, our own resources are so stretched. Our first responders, they're super, super tired already. And I think even for us, ordinary citizens, we also get disaster fatigue, calls for support, water, food, medicine, etc. We try to help as much as we could, but resources on the ground will never be enough, especially with the gravity and intensity and frequency of intense climate events. So that's why at the start I said, it's good to hear about how we are helping each other, how we are trying to build resilience. But there comes a point when resilience is no longer enough. We really have to demand accountability. The polluters should pay. We should kick out those polluters, and we should also challenge our own governments who are also still accepting, mining industries, foreign corporations, etc., for the sake of investments. These are not investments. These are destroying our country and our people. So let's talk about our common fight for accountability and making our own governments, developing countries, recognize and realize that if they don't shift their policies towards being more investment friendly, foreigner friendly, those discussions around enabling environment, that is so very, very dangerous and disastrous for all of us, as we are all feeling right now. So I don't think, how do we raise funds? How do we support? We will support because it's in our DNA to help each other out. But there comes a point when we can also be, fully stretched already and we lack the resources.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Tetet, for your very passionate answer. We would like, I think we have time for just one more question. If anybody else would like to take the opportunity to do so. Oh, Avi, would you like to say?
Yeah, I'd
Respond?
like to add on to what
Sure
Tete
thing.
said into the earlier part of the question. I think that's where the community needs support, that like when the Fund for Responding Loss and Damage had that resources and they open to support that, I think we need to have that preparatory work at ready, because definitely they would have like different implication, like a different restriction, like different challenges that you need to meet this criteria and all. So for example, for THAME, like if like the Fund for Responding Loss and Damage, like they would like disperse money. So I think that's where we need to do homework at the home, because definitely there are many communities that needs resources, but the resources that we have now, like we definitely prioritize that, and all will not get that resources. So I think we need to do preparatory homework and make sure that the communities that are in need get the resources at the first. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avi. And Sunil?
Yeah, very briefly, and just to add on to what other colleagues have said. So what has happened is, like, we've been spending a lot of time on, what kind of mechanisms and institutions, are needed to be created. But when, these are created, they just don't serve the purpose of, what they're supposed to do. For example, we created GCF, we created other, financial institutions within this mechanism. But at the end of the day, what happens is, the communities are not getting what they're supposed to get. And then the primary reason of that is that there's no money being placed by developed countries. Look into the numbers where they are, and we talked a lot about what is needed. So there's this stark difference between what is needed and what is available. So we must work to make sure that the adequate financing is available. And then we definitely will work towards, in local situations and in our own countries to make sure that it is, reaching communities effectively. It is helping them build resilience, but most importantly, it is them who are deciding what to do with those resources available. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I believe that this is our final question from the
Thank you.
audience.
Thank you so much. My question is to Mingma sir. Since you represent the local government in Nepal, so I'd like to ask you that what kind of resources, if available to the local government, we will be able to addressing the loss and damage, as well as we will be able to address the climate change issues in your local government? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as an indigenous people of that area, the Everest area, we believe, we have strong beliefs, and we have strong thoughts about the natural resources. And even we climb mountain, we worship for to get permission to climb. That we say we don't do any pollution, we don't do any harm, any destruction. Like that, we worship our lakes or the natural resources. But the but we do these all things. We have that all strong beliefs for all the living beings. But we are getting a disaster. Even we have well-wishing, we believe in our religious things. The problem is, climate change and all these things. But the question is, what are the role of the indigenous people of that area to get all these problems? But I think we have never destroyed our natural resources. We have nothing done to increase the temperature, for rapid melting of ice, rapid melting of glacial lake. But we are getting this kind of problem, after this kind of problem, we have faced many. Even in the case of Thani, we are rebuilding our community. We are rebuilding our school, our clinic, our road, and everything. From our rural municipality, from local government, we tried our best, but we don't have enough budget. We don't have enough fund to do all these things. So in the first case, we did some effort for immediate relief, for immediate response, but we still have to rebuild our community. We still need more funds, because the time is 3,800 meters. Is in cold area, is in mountain area. But the victims, the affected people are still living in the temporary shelter. And also the children of our community, they are not getting back to school. So there's a problem. So to solve all these problems, we need more fund. We need more support from the indigenous community, for the Nepal government, and from all the stakeholders. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mingma, for your response. And to conclude this side event, allow me to share a brief synthesis based from the inputs of our panel of experts for the past 90 minutes, more or less. So as we mentioned earlier, the context of Asia Pacific is very diverse. And with that diversity comes with different challenges, different solutions, and different approaches to responding to the adaptation needs and concerns regarding on loss and damage. And based from the inputs of our panel of experts here this afternoon, three things in particular. Number one is that instead of looking at limits, perhaps it's time for us to look at all these issues in a continuum. And what that means is we are looking at the financial side of loss and damage, the technical side of loss and damage through the FRLD and the Santiago network. And we also look at communities, from the fisher folk communities to the mountainous communities. And we need to understand that they are interconnected, that these challenges, that all these issues we're talking about are interconnected, and they should be synergized. The approaches to addressing adaptation and loss and damage, given the urgency of addressing the climate crisis in the Asia Pacific, one of the most vulnerable regions in the world, is they need to be synergized. And we have seen many cases in the climate negotiations, even before I was born, to be honest with you, that they are looking at limits not as in terms of organizing decisions and actions, but rather to limit the progress of the negotiations, which in turn affects numerous vulnerable countries and communities in the Asia Pacific. But the lines are getting blurred. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The continuum approach could be a good thing as well. That's number one. And number two, despite the diversity, and also because of that diversity in the Asia Pacific, we should look at this same vision. So going back to our original question for the side event, how do we translate from the global to the local level for adaptation and loss and damage regarding finance? I got one word for you: needs-based, with a hyphen. Needs-based. So let's listen to what the communities, what the most vulnerable groups are saying. Our negotiators from developed or even developing countries, for that matter, they keep saying, our countries are one of the most vulnerable to the climate crisis. We need to respond. We need to scale up. Well, we're here. Let's listen to them. Let's listen to what their needs and concerns are, so that we can enhance ambition, enable action, as the COP29 presidency would say. So our finance needs to be needs-based, anchored on human rights, climate justice, and accountability. And with that, we would like now to formally conclude our side event. And we'd like to give a warm of applause to Golam Rabani, Wanon Permpibul, Mingma Chiri Sherpa, Sunil Acharya, Abhishek Shrestha, Tetet Nera Lauron, and Maheshwar Dakal, who already left earlier, for providing insights into this side event. And to formally close, we would like now to invite our panelists to please rise for awarding of the shirts from the Asia Climate Change Consortium. And we hope that we can also take a picture with the T-shirts. We also would like to thank Golam Rabani for the side event. Sorry about that. Okay. So now for the photo.
We push it. One with the report only, just one with this Thame report. Report, we'll share with you.
Come closer and do like this.
If you are